Hi, this is Reed G. York. I'm doing a presentation on first lessons on finding money when you are preparing a grant proposal. There are several types of funding you might want to consider before this process starts. One is that there are foundations that provide funds, a good source of funding for grants. These are usually organizations, nonprofit organizations, where wealthy people have that money for things to do good. You can apply to that source for your grant. One is, of course, governmental. There are several levels of government. You have your local government, state government, and federal government, all of which are possibilities for funding in certain kinds of situations. And there is corporate funds as well, but this is usually not as extensive as the other sources. Sources of information for finding the money would be, of course, your local library or a university library, if they're available. The foundation, a directory, is an excellent source, but it is a subscription service, which is fairly expensive, so you need to get some help from someone who subscribes. Perhaps your library will have a subscription to the foundation directly. The Community of Science is an internet website that can be of help to you in this regard. The www.grants.gov source is for federal grants, and then there are local and state resources. So there are a lot of different places you can go to find information. Or you could just Google it, as they say. You could simply insert the theme of your need into the internet and get many options available to you. If the site ends with .gov, this means it is a governmental site. You may need to narrow the scope up for keywords when you first go through your process. You may find that the number of sources presented to you is too great, so you need to narrow the scope a bit. Some issues to consider, here are several of them. What is the target population for this funding source? What geographic area does it target? What type of organization can be an applicant? What is the minimum or maximum they will fund? What is the time frame for applications and the probability of success? These are some of the issues you would want to consider as you're thinking about whether a particular funding source is an appropriate one for you to spend your time preparing an application for funds. Tips in acquiring funds. You should start with a good idea of what you want funded and why. You shouldn't go trying to find out what the funding source wants to fund and then start thinking of an idea. You need to have a good idea of what you want to fund and why you want it funded. Make contact with the funding sources if that is possible. Some are difficult to make contact with, but make that effort. Do not make assumptions. Ask questions. What do they really want to fund? Follow all instructions to the letter. One of the biggest concerns of funding sources, if you talk to people who work there, you will find that one of the biggest complaints they have is that they get a lot of grant proposals where the directions were not followed, and that often means that the application is disqualified. Here are some tips on acquiring funds. The continued list is the closer to home the funder is, the better, generally speaking, because they will be more likely willing to fund a local service because it meets local needs. A national funder will usually be interested only if the project will have national significance. So make sure you have a certain amount of broadness to your proposal when you're seeking funds from a national funder. Showing other sources of financial support strengthens your request because it lets the funding source know that others have reviewed your request and they like it because they have funded something along the same lines. Federal requests take much time. They also typically have a lot of money, but there's a lot of time preparing all you need to prepare, and there's a lot of competition. 3 keys to success, I would say. One is the relationship you have with the funding source. This is very important. Don't just think about what you're proposing, but also develop a relationship, if you can, with the people who work for the funding source. The second is the fit of your proposal with the interests of the funding source. If they're looking for helping developmentally delayed children, then obviously that's what you propose, if that's your intent. The quality of your proposal is the third one. I'll focus a lot of attention in this instruction on grant writing on the quality of your proposal. But these other 2 things are also very important in determining the success of your effort to achieve funds. I would say you should look locally first. You should first seek funds from any source of funding that clearly is local and addresses local needs. An example might be the local United Way, while another is local or state governments or regional foundations. You'll find a lot of funding sources are very restricted to certain regions, so the closer the funding source is to you, the more likely you will be successful in getting funds. A major advantage is the increased likelihood to establish a relationship with the funding source. The second advantage is the geography. The local United Way is much more likely to have someone who could talk with you about your proposal than a national foundation. The Community of Science is a source of finding funds. This is an organization with information about scientific research and grant opportunities. Here is the website for that. It is designed for people with organizational affiliations like universities or nonprofit agencies. So it's best to have such an affiliation. By the way, you usually are not eligible to get a fund for you as a person, to get a grant funded for you as a person. Most funding sources do not allow you to be eligible to do that. Here's an example in the summer of 2008. I put in the keywords child abuse. I found, among other things, that the McCarthy Family Foundation is currently accepting grants to fund child abuse prevention programs. Non-profit agencies were eligible, but it was only for programs in San Diego County. That didn't fit me, so I had to move on. Another example, also in the child abuse search, was an example from the Target Corporation. Family Violence Prevention Grant was the title. The purpose of this was to prevent family violence through such mechanisms as parent training and family counseling. So you see from this, they have both the target behavior to be addressed, but also the things you do to address it. Continuing this particular example, you were eligible if you were in a place where a Target store was located. It was a small grants. This was a source of funding for small grants, $1,000 to $3,000. That did not fit my needs at the time. So once again, I continued my search. I did get this, by the way, restrictions. Not individuals or educational institutions or religious organizations would qualify. Here is another example. When I use the keyword adolescent parenting, I found an example. This one addressed issues related to family disintegration. The rationale was supplied for the purpose of the grant, which could be a good guide for determining potential success for your program. Look at what's behind what they want to fund and why, and make sure your idea connects very well to that. However, with this particular example, it was restricted to Baltimore, Maryland, so I went about my way because I was not in Baltimore, Maryland. So you typically have to go through a process like that until you find one that really fits you. So be patient. A source for finding federal grants. The advantage of the federal grant is there tends to be much more money, but the disadvantage is that there's a lot of sophisticated competition. Here is a source for funding of various kinds from the federal agency. In searching this, one has a keyword search, for example. I put in adolescent parenting in December of 2008. I found one of the options was parenting capacities and health outcomes and use in adolescents. Letter R01 was next to it. When you see a letter with a capital R next to it, it usually means that it's a federal. It usually means it's a research grant. By the way, R refers to a research grant. If you're doing a program grant, that would not be where you want to go. The National Institute of Health had a number of you a little bit more information about that one. The program announcement solicits research applications aimed at increasing the parenting skills and capacities of parents and caregivers to improve the outcomes of their young and adolescent children. Notice that this refers to both the parenting and health outcomes, and that this is a research grant, not a program grant. Some of the keys to the grant seem to be that you recognize that a key to adopting poor health practices is parenting role modeling. So if your program has something to do with role modeling, that would be good. You should target parents or caregivers with emphasis on parenting skills and include at least 2 risk factors. Those are the things I pulled from reading the information from the internet. Reduce risk factors, enhance protective factors were outcomes they were seeking. Okay, let's summarize briefly. Start with you should start with a good idea of what you want to do and the goal of it. Search the internet, of course. Be sure your agency is eligible. Be sure your proposal fits the funding source. Clarify what the funding source really wants. And of course, if you can make contact with the funding source, that is really very good. That's the end of the presentation. I hope this was helpful to you.